What's up, guys? Welcome to JS Racing. My name is Jason, and today we are going to talk about tires, and more specifically, as a driver, how do you warm up tires and the reason why you need to learn how to do so. Now, this is another video for the beginner series, so if you're just starting out learning about karting, please feel free to follow along, and I hope that this information will be able to help you out, because the more you know, the more you have an edge over your competition. So let's get started with the basic facts of tires. Now, I have in front of me two types of tires. Now, these two types of tires are basically the same throughout all the different levels of circuit racing, like Formula, LMP, GT, and touring cars. So these are basically just the two main types of tires that you will encounter in your racing career. Now, the one I have on this side, it doesn't have any distinct features. It's very, very smooth to the touch. These are called slick tires. The only features that they have are holes occasionally over the surface of the tires. These are just there as indicators to tell you how much of the tire is left after being used. They do not provide any grip. Okay, and slick tires are designed exclusively for dry surface, and they need to operate at high temperature. Now, on this side, it has grooves and treads just like the tires you see on road cars. These are called rain tires or wet tires. These are obviously designed exclusively for wet surface racing, and these need to be operating at low temperature. Now, here's the first keyword mentioned: temperature. Temperature will dictate the performance of these tires, and they both have a very strict window of temperature that it needs to be operating in to provide you with the best performance. Okay, slick tires need to typically operate at 60 degrees or 65 for karting, and for higher levels of racing all the way up to 90 degrees. Okay, for wet tires, on the other hand, they need to operate at around 15, 20 degrees, 25, something like that, very, very low. Okay, why is that? Now, here's the second keyword: breakdown. Now, these tires are all made with special rubber compound, and these rubber compound are designed to break down at a certain temperature to become sticky. When it becomes sticky, that's where the grip comes from. So for slick tires, when they break down, they need to have a very high temperature to do so, and rain tires very low. Now, if these are not operating in the right temperature, slick tires will have no grip at all. You might as well be ice skating. Now, with wet tires, if they're way too hot, they will start breaking down a lot faster than intended, and you will literally see chunks of rubber flying out of these tires. So it's very important as a driver to understand the temperature requirement of your tire so that you're able to control it with your driving. Now, if you watch motor racing, especially Formula One, you may see sometimes that just after a wet session, you know, the track is starting to dry up. Everyone's on wet tires, but they're rushing back to the pits to change to slick tires. Okay, you may see drivers intentionally running over wetter parts of the surface or water puddles, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to cool down the tires. Like I said, if it's too hot, it'll flake away. So they are intentionally cooling down the tires so that they can maintain the best possible performance from these tires, even though the track is drying up, so that they can get back to the pits as quick as possible. So if in the future you get to be using rain tires, you need to keep that in mind. Always be very conscious of what the tire is doing, where it's going, and try to cool it down as much as you can. So here's a second thing that you need to understand about tires as a very crucial element, because it interacts with the temperature very much. They influence each other, and that is tire pressure. And so let's not talk about the relationship with temperature first. Tire pressure by itself will change the shape of the tires. Now, for example, these tires are supposed to operate at an optimum tire pressure of 1.3 bars of pressure. If you inflate too much, it will actually start bulging out. Okay, when it starts bulging out, it will decrease the contact surface with the track, therefore limiting the amount of grip that you will get out of these tires. Okay, and when you overinflate them, it will also become much too hard. Okay, so the tires will feel like they're starting to bounce. So it's always important to understand what is the optimum pressure that your tires need to be at, and adjust the pressure to accommodate for that. So what about the relation with temperature? Well, simply put, temperature can increase tire pressure or decrease tire pressure. Imagine this: your car is going around a track, it's constantly under friction. So the more it is under friction, the more it'll heat the rubber up. Now, if you go back to when you learn about states of matter like gas, solid, and liquid, with gas particles, it's basically just a lot of vibration and a lot of space in between the particles, molecules, whatever. The more you heat it up, the more vibration you get out of the particle, and therefore the more space you get in between them because these particles are pushing each other away. So that's basically what's happening inside the tire, but because it's a sealed environment and the tire is very strong, it's acting on the gas, like the air itself. It's trying to contain everything in and the air is trying to push out. Now, because it's trying to expand in volume, but the volume, okay, is not going to be able to expand as much as opposed to, outside of the tire. So that would become tire pressure. Okay, so the more you heat up the tires through friction, the more the gas will try to expand and, thus increasing the pressure inside of the tires. So what happens if you have too little tire pressure? Well, if you have too little tire pressure, these tires will deform a lot more than intended, and it won't actually give you a lot of grip either. So you will feel that your car is actually quite nervous because your tire is also deforming as you're driving. So too little grip, no good. Too much, no good either. So it's very important as a driver for you to understand about tire pressure because it will dictate also the performance of your tires. So what happens if you put 1.3 bars of pressure and then you hit the track? Well, what will happen is if you go on a 10-minute session, for example, it will come back at possibly 1.4 or 1.5 bars of pressure depending on the temperature of the day and also how hard you were running the car. If it's too high of a pressure, the tire will deform, so it won't provide you with the best performance. But as I mentioned, if you're driving on track, the tires will experience friction regardless and the temperature will rise regardless. So what do we do to compensate for that rise in temperature as you're driving on a track? So what we do is, before you hit the track, we'll lower the tire pressure to 1.1 so that we can accommodate for all the friction that you'll be putting on these tires, thus the temperature increase and also how it affects the tire pressure. In the beginning of the session, you may feel that the car is not behaving as well. It's a bit nervous, it doesn't have a lot of grip, and this is when, as a driver, you need to know how to actually heat up the tires as soon as possible. Now here's another scenario. You are going on a 20-minute session and the mechanic gave you 1.1 bars of pressure, but you ended up coming back at 1.5 after 20 minutes. So the mechanics might say, okay, we're going to lower the starting pressure to even lower, maybe like 0.9 bars of pressure. So next time you go on the track for 20 minutes again, you'll come back at 1.3. But here's the problem. From 0.9 to 1.3, we don't know how soon you reached the 1.3 bars of pressure. It may have taken you 20 minutes just to get to 1.3. So maybe throughout the entire session, you're not really at the right temperature, so you're not really driving, like the car is not responding to you correctly. And by the time you got to the pit, okay, it may just reached the 1.3 bars of pressure. So when mechanics check your tire pressure, okay, it looks correct, but then you might say to the mechanics, the cart feels wrong. It will be very confusing for them. So as a driver, it's very important for you to be able to warm up your tires as soon as possible, because not only is it going to give you the best feedback, okay, the most correct feedback, but also if you are in a qualifying session or you're about to go into a race, if you're able to warm up your tires and get the grip up as soon as possible, you will have an edge over your competition. Now, the highest levels of drivers, okay, like Formula One drivers, they're able to get the temperature up within 1 or even half a lap. So it's very important for you as a driver to practice over and over again how to warm up your tires as quick as possible. So this brings us to the techniques that you can employ to warm up your tires as quick as possible. Now, you need to understand that the one thing that gives your tires the most friction would be lateral forces. Lateral friction will heat up your tires very, very quickly. So most of the lateral forces will come from cornering. So the first thing that you want to try for heating up your tires and putting as much lateral forces as you can to the tires would be, when you corner, take a wider arc. Okay, you don't need to be hitting your apex in your first lap. There's no need to do that. Just take a wider arc, and as you're cornering, put as much speed as you can onto the kart right before you lose control of the kart. So what this is essentially doing is you're carving around the corner. Okay, just imagine yourself snowboarding or skiing. You're using the cart to carve around a corner. This will put a lot of lateral forces onto your tires, and it will help heat up the tires very quickly. So any fast corner, high speed corner, medium speed corner, try to do that as much as possible. This will help heat up your cart very quickly. Now the second technique that you can use would be wheel snapping. Now wheel snapping is literally just a very quick snap of the steering wheel left and right, but you can only do this during straight lines. Okay, so you do like a very quick left and right snap. It'll put a lot of lateral forces in the front tires. So if you are struggling to put friction into the front tires, you can try doing that during the straighter parts of the track. This will help you heat up the front tires very quickly, but it won't do much for the back tires. So just keep that in mind, because if you're just getting out of the pit lane and you're doing the wheel snapping first, your rear tires is not going to get much of a warm up at all. So as you're entering the first corner, you may feel that the front tires have more grip than the back. So when you're doing the cornering, don't turn the wheel too much, because you will get oversteer. So just keep that in mind. Now the third technique that you can try is swaying. So this is something that you will see the Formula drivers doing a lot when they're behind the safety car, or when they're doing a formation lap. They'll do a left and right sort of sway. When you see they're swaying, it seems a bit slow, but for those cars, it's actually quite sufficient to do it like that to warm up the tires. But for karting, it's a bit different, because karts are generally lighter and drivers are quite young when they start out learning about karting. So you need to be a bit more aggressive with the swaying to be able to put sufficient friction, lateral friction, to all of the tires. So it's the same action, you're swaying left to right, but you need to do it a bit more faster and more aggressively when you're doing it. But you need to practice that a lot, otherwise you will be losing control, and it's very dangerous. So only do it when there are no carts around you, no carts coming behind you, and you need to practice that technique quite a bit. Now the fourth thing that you can try, and it's also a technique that I use quite a lot myself, and that is drifting. Drifting is never encouraged for circuit racing, because drifting wastes time, but drifting is also a very good way at putting lateral friction to all of the tires on your kart. Because when you're trying to drift, you need to oversteer, and then you need to steer the opposite direction, so that it's not going to complete the oversteer action, and then you spin out. So if you're very good at recovery, you can try drifting, okay, but there is a caveat to that, because some tires are not good at handling lateral forces. If you're overly aggressive, like using techniques such as drifting, it will create a lot of graining for those tires, and you'll end up ruining the tires. So use that technique sparingly, and also you need to understand your tires. Maybe you can check with your tire supplier, ask them what sort of technique is the best for warming up their tires as quick as possible. And that's also part of the learning process. You need to understand your tires very well in order to use the right techniques. Now there's one more thing that I didn't mention about slick tires, is that slick tires actually have a wide range of different compounds. They go from very hard to very soft. And if you watch Formula One, you'd know that there's always a soft, medium, and hard. Now the difference between the different compounds is that the softer you go, the more sticky it gets. Okay, the more sticky it gets, the more grip you have, and the more grip you have means that you can brake later, you can accelerate out of the corners a lot sooner, and you can have a much higher cornering speed. But for the harder compounds, it's quite the opposite. You're not as quick, you don't have as much grip, but the tires will last a lot longer. So knowing this fact also plays a very important part in how you warm up your tires, because softer tires break down a lot easier, and hard tires take a lot longer to heat up. So you need to know exactly what the characteristics of your tires that you're using, and also what the softness or hardness of the compound is, because with soft tires you don't really need to take that long to warm them up, and if you're overly aggressive you can actually ruin those soft tires. So that's something that you need to keep in mind as well. Now that you have learned all the techniques that you can use to warm up your tires, you need to practice. So how do you practice? So next time when you go to the track, okay, put in maybe 0.3 bars of pressure less than the recommended optimum tire pressure. Hit the track and do only 2 to 3 laps. Come back and measure the tire pressure. If the tire pressure did not rise to the optimum recommended pressure, cool down the kart, cool down the tires again, let it sit for a while, and then once it hit the tire pressure that you put in before, go back onto the track again, do only 2 to 3 laps. So when you're able to warm up the tires within 3 laps, then cool it down again, try 2 laps, and keep practicing until you're able to do it within 1.5 lap or even just 1 lap. That is your goal. It may take a while to learn, but it's all just about practicing. The quicker you're able to heat up the tires, the more of an edge you will have over your competition. Okay, this is a very important skill for every driver to know how to do. So practice, 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 but just make sure every time you get back onto the track again that your tires have cooled down sufficiently. Okay, if your tires are still warm, it won't give you the most accurate result. Okay, so just make sure the tires have cooled down sufficiently. Okay, then you get on the track and practice your techniques over and over again. You might ask, okay, so if I'm on a longer session and I'm constantly putting more and more friction onto the tires, wouldn't it just keep heating up? Well, yes and no, because the tire temperature is also affected by track surface temperature and also ambient temperature. So a lot of times we will accommodate for all those temperature changes and also decrease or increase the amount of starting tire pressure. So on a hot summer day when it's like 45 Celsius degrees out, we will lower the tire temperature to maybe like 0.65 or something like that to start you out, and you will reach the optimum tire temperature very, very soon. But the overheating part, well, that really depends on the track layout, because in straight lines there aren't a lot of friction being placed on these tires. So during straighter parts of the track, the tires are actually cooling down. They're only heating up during cornering and high-speed corners. So if your track has a lot of high-speed straight sections, you won't have as much of a problem with overheating. But if you're talking about a track that is very high speed and is full of corners, we will have a problem. So the starting tire pressure will be lowered a bit more to accommodate for all that amount of friction. But at the end of the day, the tires won't be heating up to no end. It will always reach around 60 to 65 degrees. It may overheat past 65, but it won't go to like 90. But you have to know that when it does overheat past 65, the tires, depending on the manufacturer and the compound you're using, the grip level will drop drastically. So that's also a concern, but that's only if you're really racing in a very, very hot day. So most of the time it shouldn't be a problem. Anyway, that's it for this video. I hope the information that I shared with you will be able to help you out during your racing career, and feel free to ask me any questions. And if you're like pros or anyone like that, you know, feel free to share your experience or correct me if I was wrong in anything. But it has served me quite well, all of these techniques and information, so should be okay. But anyway, that's it for this video. I'll be doing similar videos like this in the future for the beginner series. So if you're interested, stay tuned, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.